Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're just going to give everyone a minute to enter the meeting from the waiting room. If you'd like, when you join us here, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And we'll get started in just a few seconds. Great to see so many people here. All right, hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to the San Francisco County Regional Conversation. My name is Kara Smith. I am the Manager of Programs and Organizational Advancement for Northern California for Californians for the Arts. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm zooming in from Nisenan Tribal Lands, also known as Sacramento. And to get us started today, I'm going to pass it over to Susie McKinnon, Director of Arts for a Better Bay Area.
Thank you, Kara. I'm Susie with Arts for a Better Bay Area, also known as ABBA. My pronouns are she, her. We partner with Theater Bay Area Executive Director Brad Erickson in this event, but he had an urgent matter to attend to today, so unfortunately he can't join us. If you're not familiar with ABBA, we are a small but mighty organization that functions as a collective, and in most cases our work is in collaboration with others. We launched in 2015 by grassroots effort among local arts leaders. Our focus then and now is to build a network of arts workers, organizations, and advocates to help us build connections amongst our community. And so by doing this, it enables us to better rise to the occasion of working towards building unity and common ground to advocate for increased support and equitable access to the arts and resources for the arts. Many times our programs are reactive and focus on current needs and challenges. Over the years, we've hosted many convenings, events, and outreach initiatives to help inform and engage the community and advocate on behalf of the arts. Please join us, check out our website, and I encourage you to go to our membership page. Now I'm going to quickly review our agenda. We have a very packed schedule. And so after our welcomes, we will hear from Californians for the Arts, who will provide important information, updates, and discussion around state arts policy. They will then go into a Q&A session and also field priorities from you. Then we'll move into our local San Francisco area of the conversation, and we'll hear from 3 distinguished local leaders who will share information pertinent to the arts and culture and economic recovery. This will be followed by a brief Q&A, and then we will have a local arts related call to action for all of you to consider, which we will announce. We will then go to our closing remarks, and we'll let you carry on with your Thursday afternoon. With that, I'm going to send it back over to Kara.
Thank you so much, Susie. We're so glad to partnered with you and also with Theater Bay Area on this conversation today and have our panelists here. And I just want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. There is closed captioning enabled. To enable it, you can click the live transcript option on your menu bar. As we have multiple areas for discussion today, and we can't wait to be in discussion with you, we hope you will raise your hand if you'd like to speak or put questions or thoughts or resources into the chat. We'll collate them from there. When you're not speaking, we ask that you be muted. We ask that you be mindful and respectful of your input and of your fellow attendees here today. And just to note that this meeting is being recorded. The materials and recording from today's meeting will be shared with everyone following today's program. I want to briefly shout out my colleagues that are here on the call with me today. We have Tracy Hudak, who is also a manager of programs organizational advancement like I am, but for Southern California, Eduardo Robles, who's the manager of field engagement and communications, and our executive director, Julie Baker, who I'm going to hand it off to now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kara. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Brad, who is not with us here today, but worked on this, and who is also a very long time member of our organization, Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates, Brad Erickson from Theater Bay Area. So just quickly, this is actually the 11th regional conversation we've done, I think, in the last 6 weeks. We Zoom all around the state of California, and this is the third iteration of our regional conversations. And really, this is a way for us to both share what the work we're doing at the state and federal level, to give you some of the updates on policies that are being developed, budget allocations, and status update on things like that. But it's also for really a chance for us to listen to you and learn about what's happening locally and in these regions. So one of the things, we will compile all of the data we're learning from these 11 conversations, put it into a summary, both that will help inform what we're doing as we go forward, but also to lift up both hopefully in the press and also with our policymakers in terms of what is the impact and what's happening right now and what are the needs. But one of the things we certainly learned from the last iterations of the regional conversations that 88% of you wanted us to do it again. So here we are. So next slide. Just briefly, I'll mention who we are. I am the executive director of 2 organizations. California Arts Advocates is a C4 lobbying organization. That is where we work to directly influence what happens in particularly the state legislature for funding and legislation and resources to go to the arts, culture, and creative industries and workforce. And our C3 is Californians for the Arts, a nonprofit organization. Really see ourselves as an advocacy service organization. We're here to help you to become more effective local, state, and federal advocates, to do policy translation, to do professional development webinars, and to give you the tools to celebrate and recognize the impact of our industry through programs like Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. Next slide. I want to stop also and just share with you who we are as an organization and where we are as an organization. As an organization, we are on a journey to be an anti-racist organization. And when I say journey, that means that we have written a statement, yes, but that is not mean that we are at the end of our work to become an anti-racist organization. We are evaluating all of our internal policies, our procedures, our employment agreements, every aspect of our business, and working with consultants, as well as our racial equity, cultural equity committee, on how to not just say this, but put this work into practice. In addition, we look at how do we put this work into practice and what we're fighting for externally. And so with that being said, we hold ourselves accountable. We try to be transparent in our work on this journey, but we ask you to also hold us accountable and to join us on this journey to become an anti-racist organization, as I know many of you are working on as well. Next slide. I also just want to share some of the things that it feels like a long time ago was 2021, but it actually, we're only in the first quarter of 2022. And with you, we really saw some amazing results last year in terms of effective advocacy. We joined in coalition with colleagues from NEVA, California, as well as California Association of Museums. And we worked to ask for $1 billion into the recovery of the arts, culture, and creative industries and workforce here in California. And at the end of last year's budget, what we saw was over $600 million invested across the state in arts recovery. We also worked on the first creative workforce bill, the California Creative Workforce Act of 2021. And on October 9th, the day I'll always remember, Governor Newsom signed that into law. And we'll give you an update on all of these pieces in a minute. And in fact, what was really important, and the only way advocacy works, is if you engage in it. And so we're so grateful for all of you. And San Francisco is an incredibly active and engaged community. And we increased overall engagement for arts advocacy by over 300%. And then we saw mayors like London Breed engage with us as well and uplift the importance of making sure that there is funding and legislation to support our industry. Next slide. So some of the highlights last year included that we worked on a survey. And the reason I mention these things is that sometimes you're asked to fill out surveys and you say, oh, you roll your eyes, another survey. And I can tell you that these surveys are critical tools for effective advocacy. We utilized that survey that we had over 600 organizations and close to 1,000 art workers that filled it out. We launched it with the Otis report last March. And with that, we were able to get some coverage, for example, in the New York Times, where we talked about that if California did not do this level of investment or look at legislation like the Creative Workforce Act, we could see a cultural depression in the state of California. And those sorts of things are really critical in terms of getting the attention we need to make policymakers look at how do we make some changes and solve some of these problems. We also launched groundbreaking social media campaigns around artists or second responders and restarting the arts. We mobilized a statewide reopening the arts task force that really got us involved directly with California Department of Public Health, as well as the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, who now really worked very closely with us in policies that affect our industry. So very collaborative in that way as well. We worked directly on the California Relief Grant and the California's Venue Grants program. And then we also, in July, when the California Arts Council announced that they had only were able to fund 21% of some of the grants that had been applied for, we worked to mobilize the field, get a petition done within 6 days. And thank you to over 1,000 of you that signed that and said, no, we need that funding to go right now in terms of these adjudicated grants, and they doubled down. So advocacy works. Next slide. Which I need to tell you guys, you know that here in San Francisco. And in terms of California arts advocates, just to, again, to illuminate the difference between our C3 and our C4, where we're directly trying to influence legislation. We sponsored legislation like the California Creative Workforce Act. We worked on, we testify. I just came from a hearing, the very first inaugural hearing that the Joint Committee on Nonprofits has done. And I was asked to speak on behalf of arts and culture nonprofits. So we just finished that hearing. And so we continued that type of work. And then in response to the impact of AB 5, we worked in coalition with a group that was a bill sponsored by Senator Rubio, SB 805. That was ultimately vetoed by the governor last year, but we did see almost 50 million in the budget specifically related to the impact of AB 5 on small budget nonprofit arts organizations. Next slide. So the question is, where's the money? All this great money we fought for last year, where is it and how can you access it? So number one, the program I just mentioned, the California Nonprofit Performing Arts Grants Program, has gone to the Office of Small Business Advocate. It's $49.5 million. It's grants up to $75,000 to help you with payroll related expenses for nonprofit arts organizations under $2 million. The latest we've heard is that program should open in early March. And if you are eligible for that, please get on our e-list so that you know when that is open for you to apply. The California Venues Grant Program, which NEVA California, and I think Casey might be here on the call with us from NEVA, we worked to secure that $150 million last year, very, very closely with them. And that includes grants up to $250,000 for live events and venues and promoters. That grant application has actually closed, but stay tuned. We are working and lobbying to see if we can either have that reopened with some changes to the legislation, as we've seen some barriers in terms of the way the legislation was interpreted and written. The Museum Grant Program, if you're a museum, that we also worked together with California Association of Museums last year, and there's $50 million to Natural Resources Agency that is currently open and open until March 11th. So apply for that. And then $100 million went to the California Arts Council, 40 million for creative youth development, and 60 million for a new program called the California Creative Core Pilot Program. Next slide. The creative youth development programs, as the Arts Council has interpreted them, really are focused on their arts and education, arts and youth programs. Those are all should be open by spring in terms of being able to apply for grants for those. The 40 million is over the next 3 years, so it just puts more money into those specific programs. So that's really exciting to see. Next slide. In addition, the California Creative Core Pilot Program, which folks from San Francisco piloted here in the city of San Francisco, and very much was something that was helped to persuade the administration and the legislature to invest in, is also over 3 years. And it is to hire artists and arts organizations to work on communications and public messages around things like public health, disaster preparedness, civic engagement, racial inequity. So that program, we believe, will also be launched probably by end of March, early April by the California Arts Council. And there's a link in this to the actual San Francisco-based core program to see how that was used here in the city of San Francisco, so you can understand how that might be modeled at the state as well. Next slide. So quickly, it's really important in advocacy to understand, what you're working with. So here in a snapshot is the California budget process and timeline. Where we are right now in February is that the governor introduced his first round budget in January. That now goes into all the different subcommittees that hear the budget items, and it gets discussed by the legislature and determined if those are the things that they want to support, or what then legislators get to introduce their items as well. What the governor's put in this year's budget, 22-23, is the baseline budget for the Arts Council remains the same at $26 million, but he's included $30 million on one-time general fund dollars to be spent over the next 3 years for the cultural districts program. It is not only to support the 14 existing, but also to expand that program. And you have some of those cultural districts existing in the city of San Francisco. In addition, the California Poet Laureate and Youth Poet Laureate, he's asked for $173,000 for that. And then a new program, which is $50 million in one-time general fund for the California Department of Parks and Rec for art installations. And that can be everything from art and performances to statues and 3D installations. And then there's also an interesting budget line item for almost $1 billion from Prop 98 general fund funding for after-school K-6 arts and music programming and summer programs. So lots of exciting things in the budget for the arts. However, there's also some things missing that we think is important that we are working with the legislature to hopefully include. What you'll see next is that in May, the governor will announce a May revise. The legislature has to sign the budget by June 15th, otherwise they don't get paid. And then the governor has 12 days, business days to sign or veto that bill. And then you get follow-up and cleanup language and bills as well. But that gives you a bit of a snapshot of where we are now. So those things I've introduced are not yet done. We're just in the beginning of that process. Next slide. So here are some of the things that we think are actually not yet in the budget that we would like to see in the budget based on what we're hearing both in our regional conversations and the work that we do through our 27 board members that are across the state as well. And so one of them is we fought for this amazing California Creative Workforce Act, which emphasizes diversity and prioritizing groups that have faced barriers to employment to being able to enter the creative workforce, as well as a living wage. Something is really, really critical that we know is not the case for those of us who enter into the creative industries. So we are asking that the legislature include an appropriation of $50 million for this particular program and bill that is signed, is law, to actually be operationalized. And so stay tuned for how you can help us with that. Senator Allen of Santa Monica wrote that bill. We are waiting to hear from his office if he will actually introduce the budget ask. SB 805, which was the response to AB 5's impact, we are still working and talking to that coalition on what they intend to do this legislative year. But right now we still have close to $50 million to support payroll there. One of the things that you see is that the California Arts Council State Arts Agency's budget remained at $26 million. It actually hasn't seen an increase in several years. At the height of the agency's budget in the year 2000 was $30.7 million. So one of the things is that we're actually below with the height. And if we accounted for inflation, we should be at like $47 million. with the ongoing reports that California is facing a budget surplus. Last report was 45 billion. It looks like there might even be more than that. We think it's not unreasonable to ask that California, where 25% of the United States creative industries, should at least be $1 per capita for the arts. And so that would be an ongoing sustained increase from 26 million to 40 million. And part of the reason we also think and hear that this is important is that the Arts Council's grants are consistently oversubscribed, and they have had to force prioritization of who gets even access to some of the grants because the agency's budget is really not able to meet the needs of the field. So we hope that you will work with us to see that happen, and you will stay tuned as we go through the budget process to ask you to engage to make sure that legislators like Assemblymember Phil Ting, who's a very important legislator because he is the head of the budget Assembly Budget Committee, hear this and see that this is something that the field does indeed need. One of the things that we're illustrating is that last year we got incredible amounts of sort of relief funding, backfill funding. What we need now is an on-ramps for sustained and sustainable funding and general operating support, not these sort of one-time, like constantly one-time funding, but actual sustained general operations. So that's some of the things that we're talking about. The other things that we are supporting that the governor's introduced, we are working with our colleagues like Neva on looking at what needs to happen in terms of these relief and recovery funds and making sure that they are indeed getting into the hands of the people and the organizations that need them. And then finally, there is an arts education ballot measure, and that was introduced. It has over 250,000 signatures already. It's called the Arts and Music Ballot Initiative. This would be a $800 million approximately allocation every year from the general fund to go into local school districts to ensure that there is arts and music education. So I'm pleased to report that our board voted today to support this ballot measure. So you'll see some action items coming from us. The process for that is that the signatures, we need 1 million signatures by May in order for it to get on the ballot, but it's certainly tracking well, and we'll share with you how you can engage with that as we proceed. Next slide. This gives you some more information. I saw as I'm talking, there's a little bit chatter about, is this slide deck available? Yes, it's available for you. It has links as well so that you can get directly to some of the things that I've been discussing. And this gives you a little bit more information specifically on the California Creative Workforce Act. Really, like I said, right now, what we're looking for is funding for this, and how is that, will it be operationalized once it receives that funding and goes to the California Arts Council in collaboration with the Workforce Development Board. But very exciting to see this type of prioritization language in law for the state of California. Language and legislation is very, very important to start to socialize these concepts so that we see the prioritization of the creative workforce here in the state. Next slide. All right, and then again, quickly, and I just try to do all this fast on federal advocacy. I also work on that as I work in liaison with Americans for the Arts. I also work in liaison with the Cultural Advocacy Group. The National Arts Action Summit will be happening at the end of March, and we'll be doing actual meetings in the beginning of April with our congressional representatives. So you'll be hearing more about that and how you can engage as well. But there are 7 pieces of legislation right now that have been introduced in Congress that have to do with the creative industry. So really new and exciting. One of them is the Creative Economy Revitalization Act. This has actually received support from Senator Alex Padilla, as well as Representative Jay Obernolte of California, which is bipartisan support. And this is $300 million for a WPA-like for the 21st century piece of legislation. So we're excited to see that happening. Just like the state, they go through an appropriations process, NEA and NEH. A lot of these things, as you read in the headlines, have been delayed this year, but we continue to track on that. There is still conversation on the SVOG Extension Act, Employee Retention Tax Credit, which was eliminated in the 4th quarter. We're still trying to get that back. And there's even conversation continued around COVID-19 relief for targeted industries that have been disproportionately impacted. There's still leftover SVOG money. And then very exciting, there was a hearing called the Power, Peril, and Promise of the Creative Economy, the first time that Small Business Committee heard about our sector. And we had two California representatives there, and Representative Judy Chu followed up with the California Office of Small Business Advocate and specifically said, we need to focus on this industry. This is critical. So this is just goes to show you that we've had incredible challenges for our industry, obviously, but in the last several years, and of course, we know systemically undercapitalized for forever, there's been incredible opportunities as well. I think when we all start to recognize what we're missing and how much we need this in our lives, I think that there's this opportunity to actually say we need to invest in this. So exciting things happening both at the federal and state, and of course you'll also hear what's happening locally, and so how you can engage in all of this. All right, next slide. I'm not going to play these, but you'll be able to, if you get the deck and you want to look at these, we've got two lovely messages from State Senator Ben Allen, the author of the California Creative Workforce Act, as well as from US Senator Alex Padilla, specifically speaking to you as attendees of our regional conversations. And that's my bit to share with you. I think I hit it right at 3:25, which was what I was on my, and now is the time to pause for a second. I will take a deep breath and drink a glass of water and offer you the opportunity to ask me specific questions about what I just presented, or to lift up some of the things that you feel is missing in terms of some of these attentions being paid both at the state and federal level. What are the gaps that you want us to know about that you're feeling that are critical to discuss? So I will pause and open it up for conversation and invite you to either use the raise hand feature, do a little jazz hands, or put something in the chat. And please, this is we'd love to hear from you.
All right, we have a question. I'm going to scroll up to a question in the chat from Toby, a specific question here. Is it known what time period the not yet open payroll support would be for?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Is there what?
Is it
so fast?
Great. Yeah, Toby, take it away.
If you know better what I'm talking about than I do, you go. But there was this through the California Small Business, you're saying there is something coming. It's not open yet. Just wondering if we know what the time frame would be if it were to open.
It is going to open. That's assured. The last date I have seen is March 8th, but don't hold me to that. But it should be early March. And so please just sign up for our e-list. We send out usually weekly emails, and you would know. And as soon as that's announced, we'll be out there in front.
And then when it opens on or about March 8th, and the payroll, what would the time frame be that for the payroll support? For those of us filling out ERTC quarters and allocating different payroll allocations and things like that, is it known?
I have to look at the actual written part of the bill language, Toby. So I don't remember that off the top of my head. I'm sure it's in the bill specifically. So either I'll be able to do it while you guys are going to do a survey in a second, or somebody else knows, and we'll throw it in there, or I'll email you with that answer. So it is written somewhere. I saw that Deborah asked a question, is there support for art space and infrastructure funding? Deborah, there isn't specifically, but there is a lot of us looking, in fact, West staff, who the policy director there, David Holland, and his team, Cynthia Chen, have been really drilling down on what's in the infrastructure package, which is a 1,000-page document. Then there's like a 400-page version of it, and then sort of trying to figure out where we can insert ourselves. The biggest opportunity is, of course, in the Department of Transportation. So we are looking specifically on how we can access those funds. I know that it always is beneficial if you can start those conversations now with your Department of Transportations, et cetera. And also they also received funding from the Clean California bill last year, which was of $1.6 billion. And some of that went to your departments in your cities. And originally the governor put in $75 million for arts. It didn't make it through for artists specifically, but there is definitely, sort of an underlying essence that artists should be included in that funding as well. So Deborah, happy to follow up more specifically about what and share with you and anyone else who's interested what we're looking at in terms of the infrastructure package.
Julie, there's two other questions in the chat. One, Ruth is talking about how PPP funds made them ineligible for SVOG funds. Is there any advocacy around changing how PPP affects the SVOG allotments?
And I'm not as much of an expert on SVOG as maybe some other people who are on this call. I don't remember. I thought it was that you had to deduct it, right? And so you're saying that you got so much in PPP that it essentially didn't make it, like you didn't have enough left over. Is that Ruth?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
It was a negative number.
Yeah. In the state version, the live venues grant, that is not the case. So hopefully you applied for that.
Yes, anxiously waiting for that.
Yes, we all are anxiously waiting to hear about that. And if you are in limbo on the venues grant program and are curious what to do about that or need help with that, our organization, and I know NEVA does too, has dedicated people to support you. So I know my team will throw in an email. Tara on our team is standby, and she'll help you kind of navigate some of that. Okay, good question here, or question. This is so exciting, yet I see far more talk than actual support. What is the actual timeframe for funding to be delivered? We are still waiting on prior obligations obstructed by COVID. It seems like so much work, and we no longer believe people will deliver what they commit to. Appreciate help, any guidance going forward. Well, one of the things, in fact, I was just on this panel to the Assembly and a joint committee, Assembly and State, around, and sort of the common thread was, number one, how slow it is to get paid, particularly in public funding. And for many nonprofits outside of arts and culture too, they're contracts, right? And then they're asked to do the work in advance, and then they get reimbursed. And so there's a real issue there. And in the case of, for example, the California Arts Council, I know that we got a grant approved in July and haven't received the check yet. So those checks are just starting to come. I can also share, and I know that others here who work in funding and public funding, is that there are, they also have had resignations and loss of staffing. And there's a lot of turnover happening in the state and local governments as well. But I can only say, Greg, that I think we are all very aware that this is one of the issues. The other thing I wanted to introduce, while this seems like a good time to do it, is I think Margaret is here from the Arts Loan Fund. Is she here still? Margaret, are you here? Yeah, Margaret Sutherland, you're here. So maybe, Margaret, this is a good time to just, if you want to quickly introduce what the Arts Loan Fund is and how you can help bridge some of these sort of waiting times.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you so much, Julie. So the Arts Loan Fund, for those who don't know, was founded over 36 years ago and is managed by Northern California grant makers. And we make short-term loans, 2 years or less, of up to $50,000 to arts and cultural organizations or those with arts programming. And we've loaned over $20 million since 1986. We are overseen by 14 steering committee members comprised of foundations, corporations, and local government agencies that currently include the San Francisco Arts Commission, San Francisco Grants for the Arts, and the cultural arts departments of the cities of Oakland and San Jose. And Jason Blackwell, who will be speaking later, is one of our prior and esteemed co-chairs. And we really need your help in getting the word out because we have a fair amount of money in our corpus. And we know that organizations are waiting for either reimbursable grants or California Arts Council grants, and could use the capital now towards programming or just to help with cash flow, and so the executive director can sleep at night. Our eligibility is a 501c3 organization, but we also take loan applications from those who are fiscally sponsored with approval of the fiscal sponsor. And budget size, our sweet spot are small to mid-size organizations. Most loan recipients have annual budgets of less than 2.5 million. And I know that while this is the San Francisco convening, our geographic focus for those who are attending outside of San Francisco is Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin, Monterey, Napa, San Benito, San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, Solano, and Sonoma counties. And we offer both secured and unsecured loans. Secured with grant receivables, like that grant awards letter from the California Arts Council or San Francisco Grants for the Arts. You might have a school contract and awaiting payment from a local unified school district or something similar. And secured loan proceeds are typically used for help with productions, benefits, galas, paying your artists upfront for rehearsals before you get your box office revenues, paying your teaching artists. And collateral is typically a grant award letter or secured contract, something that shows that there is a secured revenue stream that is coming in.
Hey, Margaret, I'm going to jump in just because I'm trying to keep us on track.
Yeah.
So your information, if you would drop your info in the chat so everyone can get a chance. And I'm just going to I apologize to jump on you. We just have a very full schedule, so I want to try and keep on track. If you have more questions for me, keep asking them in the chat. We do capture the chat. We do follow up with you and everything else. But now this is we just need to we're going to take 5 minutes, which will put us 1 minute behind schedule, but we'll just take 5 minutes right now. And I'm just going to launch in, Eduardo, just so we can get this going, which is that we have a survey. It should not take you longer than the 5 minutes for you to fill out right here and now, if you could. It really helps us to gather the information we need to respond and to uplift what the needs are of the sector. So we're going to just ask you to take the next 5 minutes to fill out the survey. The link is going to be entered right now into the chat for everybody to use. Someone on my team entered into the chat. This should open up a Google form and you will be able to enter your answers right then and there. And if you can't finish in the next 4.5 minutes as I'm talking, we just ask you keep it open and submit it right before the end of the day. Thank you. We'll just be quiet for the next 4.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you all so much for taking a few minutes to get that started or complete this survey. I'm going to transition us to the next section of today's program. And I'm going to hand it over to Susie to introduce panelists before we move into the panel discussion.
Thanks, Kara. Super excited to announce our speakers for the local part of this conversation. We're first going to hear from Catherine Daniel, also known as Kat. She's the Director of Economic Recovery and Regeneration with our city's Office of Economic and Workforce Development. After Catherine, we will hear from Ralph Remington, our city's Director of Cultural Affairs, who leads up the San Francisco Arts Commission. And then we'll follow up with Jason Blackwell, the Director of Community Investment at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. So we'll go ahead and kick it off with Kat.
Great. Hi. Thank you so much, Susie, for introducing me and just for including me in this conversation. I am really hoping that today I'll be able to get a chance to share with you all about how the city is thinking about economic recovery and the role for the arts and culture community within that, and then start to hear directly from you about how you see yourself and the needs of the community so that we can start to build together. So as Susie said, I am the Director of Economic Recovery and Regeneration. That's a position that was created specifically as a result of and in response to the pandemic. Really, all of the city's work right now is focused on economic recovery, and I am one small person in a big city. And so really my role is focused on understanding the state of the city's recovery, what is progressing and going well, and where things are lagging, and where things are just fundamentally different and likely to remain different as a result of COVID. And then also coordinating OED's response and recovery initiatives with other key departments. And then to some extent leading special initiatives that really don't belong or live in any city department already. So as an example, tourism, which was not previously sort of an area and an issue within the city. It was a pillar of our economy. And now in the COVID context, it is something that is just very different and needs some specific attention. And so another thing, and the reason that I think Susie and Brad invited me to come in and address you is sort of tracking our progress towards the recommendations of the Economic Recovery Task Force. And so I'm here really to talk to you all about that and sort of where some specific recommendations related to the arts are. So as context for that, and just, reminding everybody, the Economic Recovery Task Force was a body that was convened by Mayor Breed and then the board president, Supervisor Norman Yee, that convened from April 2020 to October 2020, and was really a body of over 100 leaders from every facet of city life that was tasked with having direct input into understanding the impact that COVID was having throughout the city and the needs that were resulting in it, and the on the ground, in the moment responses that needed to be mounted. The task force was charged sort of explicitly with guiding the city's efforts through COVID-19 recovery to one, to sustain and revive local businesses and employment, to mitigate the economic hardships that were already affecting the most vulnerable San Franciscans, and then also to build a resilient and equitable future. And so in October of 2020, they released a full set of 43 recommendations that named strategies and their priorities for doing this. And specific to the arts and culture community in San Francisco, some key priorities emerged, and the recommendations sort of directly address these, and then it was interwoven throughout other recommendations as well. So those priorities were one, to help arts, culture, hospitality, and entertainment businesses and orgs to diversify and reopen safely. And that was one of the key things that came out of that task force. Also to expand access to and activate spaces as soon and as quickly as we could as a city, and to use arts and culture and entertainment to catalyze recovery in our city, recognizing that the arts were deeply impacted by the pandemic, and they were also key and essential to the economic recovery of the city. And so that, you know, as the city was developing recovery strategies, it should be looking to the arts in order to catalyze that recovery and employing the workforce, the creative workforce in our recovery efforts. And then finally, just to, you know, protect and to strengthen our assets as a city. And so where are we? A huge amount has been done, and I am not an arts expert, and probably cannot speak to everything that the city has done. I think that, and I definitely don't have time to, but I think that there's sort of three buckets and three ways that the city sort of organized its response to these priorities. First was just the direct support for artists and for arts organizations that the city provides. And so that sort of took the form of backfilling lost revenue as a result of this severe increase decrease to the hotel tax as a result of the loss of our tourism industry during the shelter in place. So backfilling those losses with general fund. Also the relief efforts, so waiving taxes and fees for arts and entertainment venues, establishing relief grants like the Arts Reopening Fund, the Music and Entertainment Venue Relief Fund, and then also the rent relief pilot, which is actually going to start later this month to help organizations pay rent that they were not able to pay during the pandemic. And then there is also establishing new programs and funding new or finding new resources to fund new programs. And that's like just the investments that OED recently made in cultural exhibits, events and programs in community and through cultural districts. The guaranteed income pilot for artists, the Artist Power Center that I think Jason will probably talk about more, and many of the funding streams that really the Arts Commission and Grants for the Arts were probably primarily leading, and Ralph and Jason can probably speak more to them for Arts Commission and Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. But that was one bucket, was this direct relief and direct funding and resources. And then the second one, and I think this was really interesting, and sort of Julie spoke to it as what the state is doing now with the Creative Corps, but was finding ways to incorporate the arts into city functions. And we, as Julie mentioned, piloted the Creative Corps to fund visual and performance artists to support sort of proactive adoption of public health behavior, commissioning artists to create artwork supporting healthcare workers, and also in some of our departments, including our COVID Command Center, creating artists and residence programs and fellowship programs in which we commissioned artists to document and operationalize some of the work that the city was doing in response to COVID and in just, you know, the work that the city puts forward. So that was sort of a second bucket of the city support for the arts community. And then I think that the third, and this is one where I think the city is sort of uniquely positioned and really has a lot to offer, is creating economic conditions and an infrastructure that support the arts and make arts a really viable component of San Francisco in every aspect. And so some examples of what I mean by this are like the jam permits that were launched during the pandemic that allowed the businesses that had moved their operations outdoors through the shared spaces program to also get permits to incorporate entertainment and performance and music and create an environment in which they could employ artists as part of their business functions. And then I think likewise, SF Live, which is being rolled out now, sort of builds on that to create a performance infrastructure in our outdoor and public spaces so that venues and artists that perform at venues can do so outdoors in this new post-pandemic context in which there's just a lot more emphasis on outdoors. And I think similarly, the Small Business Response, the Small Business Recovery Act really increased the flexibility around entertainment uses in the ground floor so that, you know, similarly, artists and arts and culture organizations could move into spaces that maybe prior to this, they were prohibited, or it was certainly more difficult to get permitted in order to move into. And then lastly, and I think that I'm running over my time, so I am sorry for being so loquacious, but I think this is maybe the most important part, and it's certainly one of the pieces that I'm very focused on, is that the activations and events that are going to be integral to our economic recovery and weaving, like, arts is synonymous with San Francisco. I mean, it is our brand globally. And it is one of the most powerful tools that we have to spur place-based interest in a context that is now significantly less tethered to a physical context. You know, people are now so remote and they're so used to remote and accessing things online that we are seeing a loss of foot traffic in San Francisco because they can do whatever they need to do without coming in. But people will come in to experience culture and arts. And that is what I think drives a lot of the city's recovery going forward. And so exploring that and figuring out ways to incorporate that in a much more intentful way is going to be key to much of our recovery work going forward. And I think that I would just say that Ralph Remington with the Arts Commission, Valley Brown at Grants for the Arts, and some of our key sort of nonprofit organizations leading this work has been tremendous, and figuring out ways to tie that, you know, our traditional sort of arts and culture work into our economic recovery strategy and our economic development activities has been something that we've been very focused on, and I just really appreciate everything that they've brought to that. And so with that, I will hand it over to Ralph in order to talk through how the Arts Commission is approaching this.
Thank you so much, Kat. That was wonderful, and I think that was a great basis for our conversation. And just want to say hi to everybody. You guys are still getting to know me a little bit, and I'm getting to know you too. You can find me, I'm Ralph Remington, I'm Director of Cultural Affairs for the San Francisco Arts Commission. And you can find me on Instagram at Remington Ralph. You can find me at Twitter at Ralph Remington, that's 1 M, and on Facebook at Ralph Remington, and on LinkedIn at Ralph Remington. So you can connect with me in all those different places. However, if it's strictly business, contact me at ralph.remington@sfgov.org so that we can get that on a public record and I can assist you with your needs. So with all of that out of the way, some housekeeping. Just want to say we have touched on a lot of things that we're doing and that we're kind of moving ahead with. While I'm here, one of the reasons that I came is really to be about the business of unpacking white supremacy, be about the business of unpacking misogyny, be about the business of unpacking what's causing Asian hate and all of our harms to all of our marginalized and disenfranchised populations. That's what's driving me. That's what's driving the commission at this point. And that's what we're about the business of doing. Obviously, art and culture is about all of that because all of that speaks to us as a culture, who we are as a people. And that's why all of this is so important. When you look at what we're doing in San Francisco, as far as assistance with economics, and a lot of it, like I said, a lot of this has been spoken about today. But obviously, this is the guaranteed income pilot. The city was the initial funder. We supported 130 artists that supported 1,000 artists for 6 months. The city's investment of $870,000 leveraged to $3.4 million in private funds to extend and expand the program. And Jason Blackwell will speak more about that, I'm sure, later on after I'm done. And also the Artist Power Center, which also Jason will speak about. It's city funding supporting an expanded, refreshed online platform for artists and creatives. It's a central clearinghouse that officially launches on February 19th, and it'll have tremendous resources for the arts community. The Reopening Safely program supported 69 arts and culture nonprofits with facility-related expenses to provide new safety measures for their staff, visitors, and audience members. Through the Dreamkeeper initiative, the city has also invested in arts and culture in the Black community. Through this initiative, the Arts Commission has invested $2.1 million in arts and culture organizations to anchor support for the cultural assets and economic vitality in historically Black and African-American communities facing rapid change. Our funds are supporting 6 Black theaters with many grants to organizations and individual artists and collaborative initiatives to create art, host events, and activities to celebrate Black culture. The Dreamkeeper fund from OEWD, that's the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, are also supporting a workforce development program for artists to become financially successful as artists and cultural workers, and to bring artistic programs that showcase African-American art and culture to the Bayview and Potrero Hill neighborhoods. Kat's spoken to this already a little bit, and I don't know if Kat wanted to speak more about that, or do you want to say anything more about that part of it, Kat? Okay. And just last week, the mayor announced $4.7 million to support the Chinatown and AAPI arts community and the Latinx arts community in their recovery in and through the arts. So this support is ongoing. It started in March 2020 with emergency funding for arts organizations and artists, and it's continued for the past 2 years. Coming this summer is a new grant initiative for artists and arts organizations who have never received funding from San Francisco Arts Commission and Grants for the Arts. The Arts Commission wants to broaden our support and focus our funding to those who have been left out and have not been able to access our funds. So this is going to be through the Arts Impact Endowment Fund. So look out for more information on that this summer. And with that, I think that's all I have prepared today. And I will pass it on to the Director of Community Investments, Jason Blackwell at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts.
Thank you, Ralph. I feel very popular today. I have a lot of assists on the talking points I should mention here at YBCA, or Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Again, my name is Jason Blackwell, he, him, his pronouns. I'm the Director of Community Investments here at YBCA, or Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Over my years, I've worn many hats in supporting the arts ecosystem of San Francisco, prior at the James Irvine Foundation, and most recently at Associate Director at Grants for the Arts. So it is really nice to come to this lens of my work through many different perspectives, from a private funder to a city funder to now working as a nonprofit and intermediary for funds from either private or public sector. At the current rate and what we're doing at YBCA, we are trying to live into this new 5-year plan in which we are focusing on 3 major pillars. One is create, which is really dealing with our arts programming and connecting with local artists and bringing them to our space and allowing them to use that space as their own, making our space more of a community-driven art center. When it comes to champion, which is the second pillar, is where we're trying to elevate the arts ecosystem of San Francisco and our voices at local, state, and even national and federal levels when it comes to advocacy around the arts. And the last pillar is the invest pillar, which is the newest pillar of our organization. It's the pillar that I happen to be a part of, where we are trying to figure out where are the best ways to explore and experiment with providing funds to the ecosystem of San Francisco and the Bay Area as a whole. When it comes to that, we have 2 major programs, which is providing financial support to artists and artist-led organizations across the Bay Area. One is our AP Convening Grant. So with generous support from the Hewlett Foundation, we are really providing funds for artists and artist-led organizations to get together with other artists, to have conversations, to ideate, to dream about what is the best ways to use their art, utilize their talents to be a tool for community development. Those grants are up to $2,500, and they have been broken down into 5 different rounds across the 10 Bay Area counties. The San Francisco and Napa County was in round 2, and it has closed now, but we're currently in the middle of the Alameda and San Mateo County, round 3. The application opened on February 15th and we're running to March 16th. So we also know that a lot of the artists that present and produce and create in San Francisco might not live in the city any longer, might be living in Alameda or San Mateo. So we really would like you to reach out to those artists and those artist-led organizations to look into see if the AP Convenings is a good fit for them and to apply for that program now. So that opens until March 16th. The next opportunity that we have for artists will be in partnership with the California Arts Council. We will be administering the California Artist and California Relief Fund for Artists and Cultural Practitioners, which will hopefully go across the entire state. We're hoping to reach 1,900 artists and give them a one-time payment of $1,000 to assist with any issues or any hardships that COVID has presented for them. That program is still in creation. A lot of the way that I see community investment is that we need to talk to the community, see what their best ideas are, see how they can best reach the audience that they want to reach, and how we can refine our applications and our tools for engagement to meet that need. So this month we are really creating and thinking about the bare bones of what this program should look like. Next month, we're going out to the community, reaching out throughout community listening sessions across the month of March, so we can really refine the tools that will be used to reach these audiences and these artists and these prioritized communities. And then April, we'll open up the application for a short period of time. And then from then on, we'll move on through awards past then. So again, that'll be more to look forward to. In April, it'll be the California Relief Fund for Artists and Cultural Practitioners. As noted by Kate and Ralph, we will be launching the Artist Power Center soon. That is actually being launched this Saturday. I want to get all the words correct about that since I just started at YBCA about 6 months ago. So I'm going to read directly from the marketing materials that was provided to me by our Chief of Marketing. That the Artist Power Center is a digital web app that was created with the goal of connecting artists in the Bay Area to new opportunities that support their livelihoods, such as jobs, workshops, grants, affordable housing, and more. We have a powerhouse of networks of people who have worked with us, but we really wanted to give a special shout out to Dancers Group, Arts Band, Theater Bay Area, Intersection for the Arts, and the San Francisco Arts Commission for all the work that we have, that they have helped us with to produce this Artist Power Center, or this hub for resources. If anyone wanted to know what type of resources or what type of buckets of information you can find on the Artist Power Center, One is called APC Drops, which is a bucket of opportunities for jobs, grants, gigs, fellowships, residencies. There's APC Resources, where you can see different links and resources to how you can build capacity within your own organization. There's APC Community, which is more of a like question and answer, and more of an open forum of like what's going on with your organization, what's going on with our organization, how can we combine and share our resources that way. There's Be Seen, where you can post events coming up, gallery shows, open mic nights, anything that caters to artists socializing, connecting with each other, idea generation. One is APC Events, which is more about workshops, things to take place, office hours of like, again, building capacity within each other and using each other as resources as we grow the ecosystem together. And the last one is #holidays, which is just more of the fun, loving, free spirit part of the app and the website, where we can just post things about what's going on for Easter or Christmas or during Hanukkah, just to keep people engaged and interactive with the application itself. So that is with APC, or the Artist Power Center, which will be launching this Saturday. If you have any information or anything that you'd like to reach out to Nasira, who has been the project manager on that project, and her email is artistsupport@ybca.org. I'll make sure I put that in the chat once we get into the question and answer portion. And we also, Kate and Ralph mentioned that the GI program, or the Guaranteed Income Program, which is in full effect right now. We're actually going to be moving into a round 2, or a second pilot form of that, new iteration that has been refined by community partners, which we are really looking for them to present to the community as their own, instead of letting YBCA take more of a backseat approach to how this is going to be going down for San Francisco artists and residents. So you should look for more of that in the next 2 weeks or so. And I think that actually really dovetails into the idea of what YBCA sees and when it comes to investment. We are a new organization in this lane, and we are looking to really talk to artist-led organizations about what is the best ways we can support you when it comes to our community investment work. We really want to talk to funders about what are ways that we can co-design experimental ways to do public funding and to reach artists at where they are. So I really implore you, a really call to action for you all is to reach out to me with your ideas and thoughts about what YBCA could be doing in this lane of bordering presenting cultural center, as well as bordering community foundation, as well as being in community and in partnership with all of you as well. I think I went over time. I'm going to now pass it back to Susie.
Thank you so much, Jason. I was actually just going to address a quick question that somebody popped up here. And I think the question was, there's a lot of great resources that you all have been sharing. And one thing maybe I could request of you, Ralph and Kat, is a reference sheet to some of these things that you girls have all been sharing about upcoming opportunities and resources. Just a quick list, and so people know what to look out for. So that's a question from somebody here in our audience, and then also myself. So hopefully that you guys are okay with that. But we'll go ahead and go into the Q&A session. And I think we'll just do what Californians for the Arts did. If you have a question, just raise your hand. And I also encourage you to go ahead and put any questions in the chat as well, so we can try to do our best to field both ways. So if you have any questions for any of our 3 speakers here, please raise your hand and then also put it in the chat.
Looks like we had one question for Jason about those regional grants. Will the grants be available again or come back around if we missed the opportunity in our area?
So this is the first time that we're doing this type of work when it comes to the AP convenings. And we will not be doing another round in San Francisco, but the idea of us trying another project or experimenting again around this type of round-based system across the Bay Area is definitely something that's possible. So as of right now, we will not be coming back to San Francisco with a specific program, but there will be more to come.
I see John Sheridan raised his hand. Is that right? Yeah. Could you unmute, John? Sorry, we're missing you.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Possibly? Oh, good. I started something last year. I started the first ever regional art prize in the Bay Area, and awarded 72 cash awards to among 220 Bay Area artists, people living and working in the 9 counties. And I plan to make this an annual event. It's online at the moment for for a lot of good reasons, COVID being one of them, and economics, because it's all self-funded by this guy. And but I was very, very curious about building a relationship between organizations such as Yerba Buena Center and myself, among others, to make the art prize a more comprehensive, a better event, more opportunities for artists, more cash awards, because I believe in a lot of cash awards. It's a kind of an opposite of the normal competition format, which is very few prizes, very many participants. And I made it this way: a lot of prizes in a geographic area. But I'd be very, very interested in creating a dialogue ongoing, and see how we can possibly work together to make what I'm trying to do better, and to see if if what I'm doing dovetails with your with your mission and your specific goals and grants and or programs that you have. So I'm just reaching out, trying to create a relationship, and so that we become real people to each other, and see what we can do together to make more opportunities for artists in the Bay Area.
John, thank you for that statement and that ask and that question. Again, with YBCA is trying to be this place of innovation and experimentation. With our AP convening grants, which I believe I saw you on one of our information sessions, what we were experimenting there was actually with a peer selection model. So every applicant that applied for this AP convening grant was also the curators and the panel that decided on who was receiving these funds. So the idea of building trust-based philanthropy is that I want to provide you the resource, step back and administer with my capacity the funds to these artists and these artist-led organizations. But I think the artists themselves, or these artist-led organizations, are the best ones to understand what is best for the community, what is the needs that they need to be met, and they got to curate who they believe should receive those awards. Something similar to what you just said of having less people apply and having more opportunity for funding or resources is something that we could definitely chat about, of how can we find the resource for those resources, but then moving past that to what is the best way to administer that so that we can reach more artists and be able to supply them with more funds or more financial need resources. So I think that's something that we can definitely have a conversation about and see as we are creating what this investment pillar looks like at YBCA.
Are there any other questions? I'm looking for raised hands and I'm not seeing any. Or any other folks?
There was a question from David Mack about YBCA Artist Power Convenings Grant in Alameda. They need to be in person. Do they need to be in person convenings, or can they be virtual hybrid?
The convenings can be in person or virtual, and it also can be a series of convenings, and or it can be an add-on to something that you're already having. One of our pilot grants went to, oh my gosh, I can't think of her name at the moment. But one of our pilot grants went to a organization that Lorraine Hansberry Theater, there we go, went to an organization in which they had a smaller program in which they were providing younger Black female writers connection with more established artists and established writers that was more locally based. But with the influx of these funds, they were able to make the program a lot larger, have multiple sessions with these artists and established artists, emerging artists and established artists, and making a more national focus. So it definitely can be a little bit of everything.
So just wanted to also mention that we capture everything that's in the chat. We share it with you afterwards. We kind of summarize what we're hearing. So if you've got things you're not, maybe want to speak up right now, but you want to add in the chat, please do, so we can make sure that we're capturing all of that. And yes, we'll definitely get all this information from Jason, Ralph, and Kat to make sure that that's shared out, because that's why they're here today. They want to make sure, as well as the Arts Loan Fund and other opportunities directly in your region, because that's really critical. And I want to shout out to Rachel Osajima, who's on our board for Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates, and she is from the County of Alameda and the Department of Cultural Affairs, and also to Victoria Hamilton, who's on the call as well, who is the board president for California Arts Advocates and is based in San Diego, but she loves zooming around the state with us and hearing about these. I can assure you that it's really fascinating for us to try and capture 11 different regions in the state and see sort of where there are similarities and where there are differences. So Susie, do you have anything else you guys wanted to add in terms of the local focus, or Jason, Ralph, or Kat?
I would say, thanks, Julie. I would say, and I just think Julie's wonderful. I think what the work you're doing is just amazing. I mean, it's just fantastic, the amount of energy that you put into it and your passion. And so thanks for all you do for us all the time. I wanted to put out there that we're going to have we're trying to put together with Kat some kind of citywide festival. So we'll be calling on you guys at large at some point in time, at different times. We may have different types of pilots, different types of small activations. But ultimately, what I would love to see is some kind of San Francisco citywide festival. It could be a Bay Area festival at large, that would attract people to our area in a way that like South by Southwest does in Austin. And we don't have that in San Francisco, and it's weird. And now's, I think, the perfect time to get something like that going. So that's going to take a while to organize something like that, but I just want to give people a heads up on
that. Thanks, Ralph. We think you're awesome too. And I think what's really what you see here is just the incredible amount of dedication and commitment from so many different people who are really trying to address a variety of issues that we all know were only heightened during the pandemic and the continued impact of what is happening as a result of the pandemic. We talk a lot about the fact that, we know from studies like McKinsey and Company came out before Omicron saying it's going to take us till 2025 to recover. I'm assuming that with what we just all experienced with Omicron and everything else, we're talking about a longer time period here. So these sort of like wonderful relief programs are great. What I think we all need to also be looking at is how can we really look at investments that are sustained. And that is the critical piece, both directly for artists, as what YBCA I think is really championing, and what the city is doing in terms of their support for everything from venues and cultural organizations and cultural districts and so on. So the key for all of us is that we engage together. This doesn't happen by one person showing up and making some noise. It comes when we're all working on this, and San Francisco has an incredible history of doing that. And we are grateful at the state level for that partnership with Susie and SF Arts Alliance and with Theater Bay Area and all the other partners that we get to work with. So thanks for that. I think we want to switch to a little bit of kind of what's next for us, unless Susie, you've got more you wanted to include.
Yeah, actually, so I'm going to say we're going ahead and concluding our Q&A, and I did have a call to action that I wanted to bring to everybody. It's a bit of a mouthful, so I'm going to be reading this off a little bit, so please bear with me, but here we go. So we have a call to action advocacy item to request of you all before we close. Arts for Better Bay Area and its partnering organizations are drafting a letter to our city officials to request and recommend continued support to our arts and culture organizations and artists by continuing to offer backfill funding to the arts and culture allocation of the hotel tax. we're asking you to join us in this request. So for a little bit more background information, in 2018, San Francisco voters passed Proposition E, Arts for Everyone, which secured funding to arts and culture through our city's hotel tax. This allows 1.5% of this tax annually to be allocated to the arts sector. And this includes funding that goes to Grants for the Arts and the San Francisco Arts Commission, who supply needed grants to organizations and artists. This also funds cultural districts and centers. And so when this proposition passed, it was just a huge and enormous win. And we thought it was fail-proof. Then of course the pandemic hits and tourism is down, hotel occupancy is down now for 2 years. And I'm hearing that currently we're at 40 to 50% below averages of the occupancy from 2019. And fortunately, last year the mayor proposed backfilling the arts and culture allocation from decreased revenues to ensure our sector is supplied with ongoing relief. This is a huge and generous offer. However, each year budgeting is reevaluated. So we are preparing and sending a letter to send to our officials to solicit and ensure their ongoing support for the supplemental funding to come for the coming budget year. So we encourage you to please go to the Google form link in the chat. I think we'll put that here in the chat here in a second. And we'll send it to you later as well, just to add your name to this petition. We will send you a draft of the letter prior to submitting it. And if you have any particular questions about this, please email me directly and we'll put that in the chat as well. Again, thank you in advance for being a part of this mobilization. This funding is really important. And from that, I'm going to pass it back to Californians for the Arts.
Oh, me or Kara?
Tracy.
One of your team.
The slide, please. Kicking the slide. Wanted to let you know that coming up next for us is Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. In 2019, the state declared April as that month, and we invite you to join us as we turn that month-long spotlight on the arts to activate the state. This year's theme is the arts work, and we're going to be uplifting and highlighting how our creative workforce and cultural organizations work to advance justice, to provide healing, to build community, create jobs, empower youth, etc. Next slide, please. Throughout the month, we'll have opportunities like toolkits for messaging campaigns and opportunities for you to take local action alerts, etc. That's the activate the state part. And we will also be having weekly webinars on Fridays based on those themes that I mentioned, with thought leaders and practitioners across the state, helping us imagine new strategic possibilities and understand the conditions in which we are working and creating. And this culminates in the last week of April is Advocacy Week, where we take this conversation to the Capitol as delegates who meet via Zoom with our elected officials to tell these stories and build relationships with them. And we are tentatively looking at an in-person advocacy day in Sacramento, depending on how things will be with COVID at the time. But if you're interested in Advocacy Week, if you're a seasoned advocate or you're just advocacy curious, we have all that you need to feel prepared and organized and ready to meet with legislators. So please feel free to copy down my email address so I can follow up with you. And then next slide, please. And of course, the best way to stay connected with us is to join us as members. This helps drive our work and empowers us to fight for you on the state level, and we're grateful for everyone that is a member and our funders as well. And Kara, I'll turn it over to you to wrap this up.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you to our partners, Arts for a Better Bay Area and Theater Bay Area, for that presentation, to the panelists, Ralph, Kat, and Jason. We're excited to follow up with you, to stay in conversation with you as the year goes on. Susie, I'll toss it over to you to say goodbye as well, if you'd like. We're grateful for all of your time today and your input.
Yeah, thanks, Kara. Well, we kept it on time, so I'm really excited.
I
about
know, it's
that.
really
We're
impressive.
Yeah, so I want to thank you all for asking us to join you in this regional conversation. Thanks again to all of our speakers, and we'll be following up with everyone. Thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your Thursday.